And an interesting story in the Oz about the kingmakers in the Senate during the last parliament and how they plan to take on Labor this time around. You obviously sit in that chamber. What's their strategy and will it work?
Well, I read the article and I read the comments, and I think it's just the real politic of it, in a sense that the last term, I think all of them were involved in pretty serious discussions with the government about the passage of legislation throughout the Senate chamber, and at one time or another may have held the balance of power, I think. So it's going to be a very difficult landscape different landscape for these crossbench senators. The wash-up of it is that Labor really just need the Greens in order to pass legislation, which is in itself a worry. I mean, in many respects, we might have to look back to the good old days of having the last parliament, of having the crossbench controlling the show. They did a very good job, I might say, by shooting down the misinformation laws, and were very sensible on that, and probably many other things as well. But no, in this case, they're going to have to find another way through for relevance. They have said, and David Pocock has said, that using the media and using their voice that way is the way to do it. And I think that's what we'll see. I think we'll see more and more statements in the chamber, more and more statements in the media, and that is their absolute right. And that's what our democracy is all about.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And it'll be very interesting to see what that looks like over the course of the term. Now, Tony Burke, he appears to be walking both sides of the street again. This time he's blaming the High Court for making it too hard to deport some immigrant criminals. How much is it the High Court and how much is it just a lack of political will to deal with it?
Well, I think this is always a point of interest when you have politicians who are in government, by the way, just for the sake of the argument, we should just really clear that, who have the legislative ability to do pretty much what they like now, and to sort of lean into the argument that somehow this is the High Court's fault is utterly ludicrous, frankly. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The only thing you could say is that we're in a hiatus with Parliament at the moment, so there's not the ability to pass laws now. But look, we've heard this before with the arguments about the courts do this and the courts do that. The reality is it's the government's job, one of its primary jobs, to keep Australians safe in their own country. And we expect that out of our immigration minister. Any finger pointing, any blame is simply not acceptable. So I don't accept that at all. If the government thinks there's something that should be done, they should be doing it themselves, not blaming the High Court.
Now, on to the least surprising story of the day, and a $12.5 billion Central Queensland hydrogen project has been axed. The Boondoggles are biting the dust pretty hard, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's sort of, as you say, the least surprising thing you could hear, and it's reassuring in one sense, except that, we're still, of course, through the political spectrum, making the same mistakes every single day with intermittent power, green and, so-called green power, solar and wind. But yes, this is the first one. And of course, those of us that have always said, let's let the market decide what's good power and what's bad power, just shake our heads at this. This was never going to work. And in fact, these things have a habit of these green hydrogen, so-called green hydrogen propositions seem to get no further past than feasibility studies, and the private sector drops them. So, I mean, this is the issue with this so-called intermittent, renewable power, is it really doesn't stand on its own 2 feet without government intervention. Here in South Australia, we've seen at least 2 projects that have been dropped, I think, in recent times. And yet we keep getting told that by the Malinowskis Labor government here that we're going to be a green energy superpower. Quite how you export enough through wind and solar is anyone's guess. But putting that little anomaly aside, I think this is where we're going with this. The tragedy of it all, Caroline, is that before the penny drops, the entire grid is going to be in a catastrophe if it's not already. And so we're actually learning this lesson on the run where we shouldn't be. I mean, this is one of the many arguments for why net zero needs to be dropped immediately. And we need to get on with getting the cheapest power we can by any means.
Yeah, cheap and reliable. That is absolutely what our country needs for its future prosperity. Thank you, as always, Alex Antic.